Welcome back. For our final session of the day, we have a Nobel winner, a new Nobel winner. My next guest is Maria Ressa. She's the co-founder and CEO of Rappler. It's a news site based in Manila. She's a Fulbright Scholar, Time Magazine Person of the Year, and just last month, literally about a month ago right now, became the first Nobel laureate from the Philippines for being a fearless defender of freedom and expression and documenting how social media is being used to spread fake news, harass opponents, and manipulate public discourse. We want to welcome her this afternoon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
So first of all, congratulations. It's an achievement, and I should just ask on a very personal basis, and I know you've been asked it a million times, but it's a month later. What was it like? What's it been like to win the Nobel Prize? Because I know this for you was actually a surprise.
It was a surprise. And, I still, every time you say that, when you were saying that, it's like, the scream, it's still that. It's still, I can't imagine yet how it has really changed everything except to, I was under 2 oceans of water trying to crawl my way up. And now it's 4 oceans of water. But I hope to be able to, take that light that it's shown on journalists, on the Philippines, and kind of direct it in the right places where we can do the most good.
Tell us about those oceans. You just said you were under 2 oceans and now 4, but what do those oceans look like that you're trying to swim out from under?
So I run Rappler, right? I run the tech and the business. The government has done its best it's a war of attrition. I had 10 arrest warrants in less than 2 years, but I have 7 more legal cases. Rappler has 7 more as well. We're building a tech platform. What does journalism look like when you incorporate tech into it? And my elevator pitch when we created Rappler in 2012 is we build communities of action. I wanted to begin building this platform in 2016, but that was when we came under attack. So we're finally rolling out the tech platform mid-November. And then I'm trying to write a book. I finished a draft just a week before October 8th, which is when my life turned upside down. And I'm here in Harvard on a fellowship. It's a dual fellowship on media manipulation with the Shorenstein Center. And then I'm trying to figure out, what does leadership look like for news with everything we are living through? What is driving us at that point? So yeah, sorry, I probably gave you too much of a litany.
No, we're going to actually, I think, tick through a couple of them. The first, though, I wanted to go and speak to is the state of play with these legal cases. And we know Amal Clooney is your lawyer, and you've been under a lot of pressure is probably the polite way to put it. But what is the state of play as it happens now, and how does this change things, or does it?
Well, this is the first time I've been allowed to travel in more than a year. It was the 5th time I have tried. In December last year, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and I was prepared to come. And then the night before I was getting on a flight, one of the courts denied travel. I have to get permission to travel from every single court that handles these charges. So, I think right now, in addition to, what the Nobel Light is doing, I appreciate freedom. You don't know what it's really like until it's taken away from you. And I wasn't allowed. So now I've fought and gotten my right to travel. The other cases are ongoing. I have 5 tax evasion cases that essentially happened because your business, right? The government reclassified Rappler from a news organization to, and this is a quote from the documents, a dealer in securities. And then essentially said, because you're a dealer in securities, you should have paid all these taxes. Well, we're not a dealer in securities. So there you go, right? So I want to win these cases.
And all for your critical coverage of the government there.
I think on 2 fronts. We kept track of the number of people killed in the drug war. We tried to stop the impunity. Just today, we released a document from the ICC, the International Criminal Court, that ties President Duterte to a hitman who claimed he was, and this is evidence in the ICC case against Duterte. So there's about 10 stories that are coming out in the next 2 weeks on this, and kind of the corroboration that we've done. But then beyond that, and this is where what happens in the Philippines, also it shows you that it is happening everywhere around the world. that our dystopia is coming for you. It already has come for the United States. It is the kind of social media impact. What happens when social media has been optimized, in the words of tech, to the point that it is now a behavior modification system,
right,
where information operations are changing us.
I want to talk about that algorithm, but let me ask you just one other question journalistically about the reporters who are working on these stories. Are they in danger?
It kind of depends, right? Like the question I'll ask is on climate change. We're breathing polluted air. Are we in danger? It depends on, I think that's the hard part of working in a democracy where institutions have crumbled and you have the veneer of a democracy, but you step out of line and it's vindictive. So I don't know. I mean, what I can tell you is that we have increased security significantly. Part of the reason I traveled so much in about a little over a year, 2018, the end of 2018 to 2020, I had 36 approvals from the courts to travel because it was far easier to not have security while I was in Manila. It was easier to do my work outside than it was to stay in Manila and have to have closed-in security. So
you built your business, dare I say, at least initially, on the back of Facebook. Facebook was the original platform for what you were doing. And it has clearly transformed over this past decade. I'm curious sort of when you think you knew or when you decided that there was a problem.
2016, I drank the Kool-Aid. I still believe that this technology can actually prioritize the good, can actually, the reason we started Rappler is I thought that we could use technology to jumpstart development, to help build institutions bottom up. And it was pretty good up until 2016. But I would say, look at when instant articles were brought into Facebook and the algorithms weren't really changed for news. And then I would say the dominoes began to fall in 2016. Duterte was elected in May. And then about a month later, you had Brexit. Then you had the Catalonia elections. You had Macron was in 2017. You had Trump. I went to Facebook in Singapore with the data that we had that was quite alarming. And I gave it to them and thinking that they would do something immediately so we could then do a story because we were partners. And they didn't. We did a story a few months later, and that series, we called it the Weaponization of the Internet series. That's the one that got me attacked with at least 90 hate messages per hour, right? When you expose the machine comes for you. You've talked to Mark Zuckerberg about this. And
and he's told you what?
I think he got distracted because we were at a round table of founders. I was the only one. This is in April of 2017. And I had just told him that at that point, 97% of Filipinos on the internet were on Facebook. Facebook was our internet, and it was extremely powerful. And I mistakenly made the mistake that they were like a news group, that they would take that power seriously and would do something. But instead, he kind of got stuck on the 97%. And then he looked at me again, and I thought maybe I was pushing too hard because I had asked him to come travel to Manila. And then he said, Maria, where's the other 3%? And in 2017, I still laughed because he's smart and, we were talking through the tech in different circumstances. But I think what they never grappled with was that the tech choices they were making, atomized, was actually creating emergent human behavior. And that people like me, and I'm lucky compared to the people on the front lines who have died. There are 21 journalists from the Philippines who have died, 63 lawyers under this administration. And, depending on who you talk to, tens of thousands of people under this brutal drug war.
So take me inside your mind when you think about Mark Zuckerberg's mind. And the reason I ask is there's a lot of speculation about what has driven the decisions that Facebook has made. Some people say it's being strictly driven by profits. Other people would suggest to you it may be a mistaken view of what free speech is supposed to look like, and on and on. What do you think it is?
I think it's a combination. I think they did create a Frankenstein. And in 2016, I was, I worked with them behind the scenes. And some of the things that came out in the Facebook papers, the vegetables, eat your vegetables. This is from things. So I'm still under an NDA. We helped. I really felt that they were going to do something about it. But I think you have to look at Mark Zuckerberg, right? I mean, the New York Times, Sheer Frankel, the book that they did, this statement of company over country. He's a young man. Sorry, I'm old. He's never lived outside the United States. And when you atomize the world into tech, building tech is very, very different from the way journalism comes. They're complete opposites in terms of how you develop them, right? Developing a story versus developing tech. And when you atomize it to the way they have, and then they build it and iterate it based on our biology, but not looking at the impact. I call it emergent behavior, right? Because one human being behaves in a particular way. When you put the human being in a group, the group puts the pressure on that. And emergent behavior is at scale. That's even worse. So I think where I would fault him is that, the data, the evidence has been there, and it's very clear that they've chosen not to. And you look at the Facebook papers, it has been profit over safety.
Okay, but let me ask you a question, which is, Mark Benioff has described Facebook as the equivalent of a tobacco company. And when you think about a tobacco company, I think in fairness, if you take 30,000-foot view of this, you'd say actually it provides very little utility. Maybe tobacco provided some happiness to somebody, but that they knew that it was killing people and they didn't do anything about it. Facebook is a bit of a different situation. I think to some degree it provides more utility. Maybe, maybe not. We could probably have that debate, but I would imagine if somebody used it as their platform, you'd think it has some utility. And so the question is that an apt comparison or not?
More and more. Rappler still remains a fact-checking partner of Facebook. We're one of 2 Filipino fact-checking partners. A few years ago, I said we are frenemies, but now more and more, the more Mark Zuckerberg digs his heels in, you cannot solve a problem until you define it. And if you ignore it or you do a sleight of hand in a misdirection, then you really can't solve it. So here's the thing. It is like tobacco. It is addictive. Think about this generation that spends an inordinate amount of time in a performative.
Oh, I'm as addicted as anybody. I wish I wasn't.
And so the question is, are you getting something from this? Is it real connection? I mean, even in the real world, we have cocktail parties and then we have intimate conversations, right? Leadership is about understanding yourself. Is this allowing us to do it? Anyway, sorry, I go off, but yes, the more Facebook digs its heels in, especially with the data that we now have in terms of its harms, the more it begins to look like big tobacco.
Has anybody from Facebook or any other social media company called you in the last month?
I deal with them all the time. I think, so look, and I point it like this, Rappler is a Facebook partner. We are doing several things together.
Did you get a call from Mark congratulating you on your Nobel Prize?
Oh, no, that one I don't think so. I think that they know that I will not stop pointing to the problems that the harms that Facebook has done. And then think about it like this, right? I think about justice. In 2016, I went to Facebook when I got the 90 hate messages per hour. And I said, this is not normal. Under the Constitution, I have protection. And they said, oh, Maria, but you're a public figure. Well, fast forward to a few months ago, and Facebook actually put in more protections for journalists and women journalists in particular. Do I get justice? I want them to fix it. Here's the last part for me. It's that we have elections. Our presidential elections are May 9th, 2022. And if Facebook, YouTube, if the guardrails aren't put in place, we will not have integrity of elections because there is no integrity of facts on these platforms.
So how would you do it? If I made you not king for the day, but maybe Mark Zuckerberg for the day, you would do what?
Wow. So the first, and this I've asked for both behind the scenes and frontally, when January 6th happened, Facebook had a break glass act, which was to turn up the news ecosystem quality, meaning they know the difference between news and crap. And so when they turned it up, what were in the top 10 in CrowdTangle? The New York Times, CNN, NPR, right? And they kept it that way for a few weeks until they realized that engagement had dropped. It's really hard to tell compelling stories. We spend our careers learning how to do that. And yet those stories will never be the equal of the lies that are salacious. So the data has already shown lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than facts. Frances Haugen's Facebook papers actually show that, right? Engagement-driven metrics. So they turned it back. The news ecosystem quality was put back to the crap. So that's one. I asked for that. But the other part is if they really can't change it, then get out of the Philippines for a period of time. Although I don't know whether that is good or bad because our government is using information operations. Will we, civil society, be able to push back to get the right, strengthen our democracy without it? It's a tough one because it's like the evolution of human behavior. We've already evolved with this ecosystem. So yeah, anyway, if I were Mark Zuckerberg for a day,
yep.
Turn up news ecosystem quality, number one. Number two, the difference between fact and fiction. And I don't mean like, are there two of us having a conversation? That's not debatable. There are two of us. Right? Those types of things that you can come on. Or what about signals from the real world, the way PageRank, Google PageRank does it? Right? There's 135 pages that go in, but they are linked to real world authority. And when I mean authority, expertise.
Do you believe that breaking up Facebook would solve anything?
I don't think it's as much breaking up Facebook as I think what we have to do is stop discussing the downstream effects, meaning content, but move upstream to where the algorithmic biases and distribution, where the decisions are made at a tech level, right? So, because if you break it up, you'll have the same problems if you have people with no ethics. Sorry, so let's go back upstream. Let's look at what are the incentives that will safeguard democracy and still make them money.
We talk about this almost exclusively in the context of Facebook, but invariably algorithms across the board are going to impact things. Algorithms on Twitter, algorithms on TikTok. More young people are on TikTok today than are on Facebook. Algorithms on Snap. How concerned are you about those algorithms? And is there a broader construct and framework with which this needs to either be regulated, controlled, or otherwise overseen?
I'm extremely concerned because the impact has been insidious through society. A great book, Weapons of Math Destruction, right? Where some of the case studies were really about how an educational system, the school system in a state, used these algorithms and then wound up taking the built-in bias and weeding out the wrong students. So a lot of these things have happened as we've shifted to machines. So it isn't just Facebook. Facebook just happens to be the biggest, I don't think we've ever had almost 3 billion people on a platform. And so you can see the emergent behavior. The behavior modification is very clear. You can see this year, Oxford University's Computational Propaganda Research Project said that these cheap armies on social media rolled back democracy. YouTube is now #1 in the Philippines. And while it isn't the same kind of feed, the recommendation algorithm is just as dangerous.
What do you think of the metaverse? Do you want to live in the metaverse?
It's not even do I want to live, do you trust
Right.
a company that can't even deal with Facebook, that can't protect the users on Facebook with the data that a metaverse would require, right? It's really great form, but those same fundamental
Right.
problems are there.
Do you think, though, that laws can change this?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Look, coronavirus is the perfect example, right? You didn't see doctors going out to people and just injecting them. These were registered trials. They developed the vaccine. There were rules. And I guess that's part of it. An MIT professor wrote this great book. It's called The Hype Machine. He said there are 4 levers we can look at, right? The code itself, the business model, what Shoshana Zuboff called surveillance capitalism. The third are the norms. And our norms have shifted because of these algorithms. And then finally, the last and not the least important are laws. So, if we move away from the way we used to think of content, it is not a freedom of speech issue. It is the distribution. Right. When you tore that distribution away from the publishers and gave it to tech, they weren't accountable for it.
Can we talk about media and the trust in media, or rather the distrust in media? Because I think that underneath all of this is something else is also happening at the same time, which is that, frankly, the public doesn't trust the media. And the question really, and I ask it as a member of the media, is should they?
Oh, man. Okay, I was going to say, yes, of course they should. But let me put it this way. It's a chicken or the egg question. And again, I go back to the incentives, and let's take it out of social media to the internet. Because I think the original sin in terms of media has been, the journalism is the entire process, meaning reporter, editor, a managing editor, the lawyers, all of the people who make sure that one person's bias isn't there. I mean, technically, you should think coding should be like this, right? So in that story, but that's very expensive. And yet that entire process, that expensive process is what's the incentive scheme for it in the internet? A page view, cents. At a time when the economic model, when this was an add-on to the old roaring, business of media. Well, the business advertising model of media is dead. And page views have different incentives. And then that goes right back to, if you're doing page views, are you going to do the journalism that matters? Are you going to do the journalism that can get you sued? What is the incentive to continue doing public accountability journalism? Right? And that's, I think, the main thing, because the mission of journalism has never been as important as now. And yet the distribution platforms, Facebook is the world's largest distributor of news. And the data shows that it actually prioritizes the distribution of lies over facts.
But what do you make of the idea that media unto itself, at least in the United States, and it's true in the UK, and it's true in many places, has unto itself become polarized? That there is a conservative media, and there is oftentimes what's described as a liberal media. And as a result of that, there are people who will read articles and say that's fiction, or that's intellectually dishonest, or it's skewed in such a way to make a particular point, even leveraging facts.
Okay, so let me take it first outside the United States, and then we'll bring it to the US. Outside the United States, it is part of what's done this division, this polarization, is a recommendation algorithm for growing your Facebook or your Twitter account, or, and
so you think this is actually an indictment, it's a function of the social media that the media has moved this way?
So think about it like this, except the United States, and I'll go back to, the legislation that created, I was there at the beginning of CNN, and I was also there when Fox was created, and I felt the impact of this as well, right? So outside the United States, like look at the Philippines, we didn't debate the facts. We started in the center, we agreed on the facts. Right? But with this algorithm of friends, how you grow your own social media platform, your network, and how the platform grows, if you're pro-Duterte, you moved further right. If you're anti-Duterte, you moved further left. And that's 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. And each of these you're not given the feed of the other side, right? So that polarization is built into the recommendation engine for growth. Here in the United States, I began to see this with CNN and Fox, and that is legislation. Legislation changed here. Now, would that have led to this kind of what we are seeing in the US right now? In 2010, just looking at those elections, right, we had actually mapped this. And what you could see was these, if you pull down hashtag GOP, you can see two circles that were pulling apart. But there was still a bridge connecting them in social network analysis. It is, I will push forward the algorithms that continue to do that, this divisiveness. But I don't understand the US well enough, but I have felt the impact of your polarization, because where you go, you wind up taking the world with you. So, Andrew, fix this, please.
I would love to, but you've gotten there first, and you're doing quite a job at bringing some important attention to this issue. Before we let you go, I got to say, you are at Harvard, you're in Cambridge. I gather this is going to be one of the first times you're going to get to see your family in quite some time.
I'm going home my parents are in Florida, and our whole family is coming together for Thanksgiving. So I am worried about them, and I'm excited to be going back. Absolutely, yeah.
Can I ask what it's been like over the past couple of years? How many years has it been now?
Since 2016, that was when the attacks began. Look, my parents sold their home in Florida, and they had moved to the Philippines. I was going to take care of my parents. And when I started getting arrested, and my mom was going to go like wherever I was getting arrested, then I had to worry about my parents, and I asked them to come back to the United States. So the impact on my family, look, for me, it's like being a conflict reporter. You're used to it. You steel yourself. You prepare for worst case scenarios. My family is a little bit more difficult, and so I hope, I'm really glad to be here, at least to see how my parents are doing, and to help them transition better into this life for a while. So let's see. I hope, again, elections, right? Like, our elections are coming up, and I want to make sure that for us, this is existential. We're like right at the precipice. And if we don't get rule of law back in these elections, I don't know what will happen to us.
Maria Ressa, Nobel Prize winner, thank you so very much for joining us. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And thank you for helping us end 2 remarkable days of conversations here at DealBook 2021. We are so very, very grateful. And I want to thank all of you who've been joining us throughout these past 2 days. We've had a ball having these conversations. We hope that they have inspired you and created its own conversation. I know there's been headlines made, and we hope to do this all again next year. And if we do it right, we'll do it in person all together. Thank you again for joining us. See you next year.